Good afternoon, everyone. This is the afternoon session of the 2025 budget hearings. First up is the coroner. I would just want to say welcome. Dr. Tape, we're going to let y'all start off. And for everybody who hasn't already turned, we're going to be on page 227 of the budget book.
So thank you for having us here. I think you all know the situation we're in. The millage is running out this end of this year. And so we're trying to figure out a couple things. How long can we make the money we have last? Can we supplement that in any way? But in the meantime, we have to sort of work together and get our budget put together for 2025. And I think you have some questions and we can answer those questions hopefully. I brought pretty much my whole executive team because it's such an important meeting. Got my financial guy here, Doyle. Chief Operating Officer Yancey, Lawyer Paul, got Tammy and Laura, who we can rotate people in if they need to answer specific questions.
Sure. Are you ready for the questions, or you about to do a presentation?
We've provided you with our paperwork. If you have questions about it, you have questions about it.
He can't. If you also
So we're not amplified, unfortunately. So if you could. Councilman Phillips, if you could speak up.
I will say, this is not red like the other one, so I don't know if I'm actually on.
You do the bottom up here.
If it's not plugged
right
in.
Here. It used to be.
Because it was. I'm good. Okay. No, I'm fine. So when, Dr. Tate, when are you thinking that you would want to put the millage? So you're saying it's running out. When do you have an idea of when you would propose the millage be on a ballot?
Yeah, we have different options and ideas about that. I didn't know we were going to talk about strategies for millage passing at this budget meeting.
Well, I'm not a strategy for passing.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if, because you mentioned that you're running out, it's up for renewal, and I just didn't know what your plan was. If you had an idea that you're willing to share, like which ballot you were specifically intending to put it on.
We haven't decided what's best, I think, at this point.
Okay.
You know, there's sort of pluses and minuses of different options.
And when is the latest you think to where it would, if it wasn't voted on by that time, it would start significantly impacting operations?
Well, we run out in 2027 to 2028. So basically 2027, we're in the black, and 2028, we're in the red.
Okay, so if there's a millage and the latest it could be is 2027, or you think 2026?
You're talking about new millage?
Yeah. Renew, you're right.
Yeah, the sooner the better, because you have to put these things in place. And it's one of those things you kind of have to plan out, you have to build it out. We have to hire forensic pathologists, for instance, so that's an expense, you know. But in the future, that might pay off because we get out of parish autopsies. But you can't have that. You have to have one before the other.
Right. And one other question I had, I know this has come up about the DNA lab. I know is really critical function you guys provide. So my understanding is the municipalities do utilize it, but is there not always a reimbursement or something? Is that correct? Or I know that it's come up before.
That's correct. Most of the DNA is being done by law enforcement. It's mostly sheriff, followed by Slidell, followed by Covington, I think. We are in the process of figuring out how and when to ask for some of that money back. We don't want to crush their budget either.
Right.
And so we're thinking about different strategies of sort of easing it in. So maybe we give them a break for the first year, but then after that, it's not a break.
Now,
we haven't worked all that out, but yes, that is in our plans to at least claw some of that revenue back without crushing their agencies too, because we're all in the same parish here.
and what percentage of requests for using the DNA lab come from outside the parish?
None right now, I don't think.
So you don't service any other parishes?
That's correct. It's all just St. Tammany, but just local law enforcement.
And then my final question, because I mean there was confusion a while back about the, I don't remember the acronym, sexual assault that was transferred out, the function that was,
Same.
same, that was transferred out. What is the current status of that?
We have a cooperative endeavor agreement with Jefferson Parish, and they're basically running that program. And so those nurses come to St. Tammany as needed. We're sharing a grant basically to fund that, and then whatever's not covered by that grant, we're helping to pay for our portion.
So if they have to come out, you have equipped facility at the coroner's office that they are,
Absolutely not. We never do sexual assault forensic medical examinations at
And
the
they're at the
coroner's
hospital?
office. They're at the hospital every
Okay.
time in the ER, and that's where they should be done.
okay. I think that's all I have.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Corbett?
Yes, so Dr. Tatum, I think that our first question, and I think it behooves you to go ahead and address it and give us some background. Because not everybody that may be listening online is going to know exactly what all the functions, the scope of functions that are provided by the coroner's office. So we're interested in the number of employees, how many people you serve, the kind of programs you have, some things that we've, fortunately, some of us have had the benefit of having that before. But I think if you open with that for 5 or 10 minutes, it'd be very beneficial to both us as well as anybody else that might watch this after the fact.
Sure. Basically, the coroner's office investigates death. I think people understand that. That's been going back since English common law. But what people don't realize is in the state of Louisiana, the coroner's office also deals with civil commitments. So if somebody gets committed, they can be committed by any citizen. Somebody, if you think somebody's dangerous, you can commit them. It's called an OPC, Order of Protective Custody. Then the doctor in the hospital has to follow up with that, make sure it's done correctly. That's called a PEC, Physician's Emergency Certificate. And then as part of that, the coroner also has to check with that. So we have forensic psychiatrists going in and checking on that. So it's a big part of our operation is the forensic psychiatrist doing this, the CECs, coroner commitments. That's it's a huge number. And then also in addition to the psychiatric services, we also are responsible for overseeing the forensic medical examinations, and that's where the SANE nurses comes in. But basically, the law is basically written that it should be the ER docs first, and the SANE nurses can be a supplemental program. So I can give you some of those numbers you're asking about. Basically, we serve 583 residents. I don't know if that's changed any. We have 32 employees. We investigated, through September of this year, we investigated 1,578 deaths. It's a lot. We performed 194 autopsies in that time, 96 medical record reviews. Not everybody needs an autopsy. We did 93 DNA cases and released 150 DNA reports. And we issued 2,240 CECs. So that's basically the biggest number is the coroner commitments. So it's a big number. I not only I have my 2 phones, my emails, I have a radio that we monitor, and one of the things they do is they're asking for new numbers for CECs every other day. They need 10 more numbers, 10 more numbers, 10 more numbers. You don't realize how busy that is until you start hearing all those numbers, constantly asking for new CECs. So that's a big part of our business, so to speak. And it can't be emphasized how important the coroner's business is, because we're basically trying to rule out non-natural deaths. Everybody who dies needs a death certificate. Any doctor can sign out a death certificate on a natural death. A non-natural manner of death, accident, suicide, or homicide has to be signed out by a coroner. So we're basically trying to rule out all those bad things. We're trying to help society understand what's dangerous and what isn't. A lot of things we know. Motorcycles are dangerous. We get motorcycle crashes. We know methamphetamines are dangerous. But things like recently I had a press release about kratom.
Yeah.
People, we don't know exactly what it is, how it is. But until the coroner says, you know, people have died from this, maybe you don't know that. So that's where the coroner really comes in, is quality assurance for society. And without that quality assurance, a lot of things kind of fall to the wayside, because then you can have proper prosecution of cases, homicides, that kind of thing. Or if you overcall, somebody commits a suicide, but you overcall it a homicide, then you've gone down this whole pathway where you're wrong. So it's very important for us to get it correct. So we need trained individuals, And we need basically a lot of support personnel for this. And again, it's interesting because we have not only the death investigation, that's my specialty. I'm a forensic pathologist. I was trained specially to do autopsies for coroners and medical examiners. The budget stuff is out of my expertise. That's why I have all the people with me. But the bottom line is the coroner's business is very important. Just the death investigation alone, but the CECs, again, this is something that's, you're taking away somebody's liberty. It's a medical diagnosis and a legal diagnosis all rolled into one. So you better be sure that you're getting it right. And it can be abused kind of both ways. People can check themselves into a hospital to avoid something, or somebody can check somebody into a hospital. So we need to make sure we get it right. So that's kind of the importance of the coroner's office and how it fits into society.
Okay. Could you also talk for just a moment about some of the key facilities or equipment that you have? I know you've talked in the past about the DNA lab. Maybe that, if there's some other things that are specific that you have available that'd be useful for people to understand as part of the toolkit that you have available to us.
Yes, sir. Basically, we have a tremendous facility. It's one of the reasons I was recruited here is the facility, and it was built basically by the original millage by Galvin. And I think it's been there since 2015, the building has. And it's a fantastic facility. It has a DNA lab, kind of world-class DNA lab, whole section. It has basically 2 morgue suites where we can do autopsies. Right now, I'm only one doctor. I can only work in one spot at a time, but potentially we could have another doctor working in that other building. So we're not up to capacity with the autopsies, not up to capacity with the DNA, but the building is there, the investment has already been made. If, for instance, you decide to shut down that building for whatever reason, it would be easy to restart autopsy. You could restart it in any building with the bright lights. Restarting the DNA lab is not that easy because these very specific pieces of equipment that need to be maintained and validated and always calibrated, and you can't just shut them off and then turn it back on again. So that's something that this needs to continue. This work needs to continue one way or the other.
Okay. Some people use the term world-class, and maybe it's not. Could you maybe just give us a little bit more why our DNA lab is world-class compared to others in nearby states or municipalities?
Well, I don't mean it's better than anything else. I just mean it
understand that.
competes with it. It's up to standards of world class. That's something, maybe Laura can speak up to that later, but basically just the amount of equipment and the assistants and the technologists and the analysts, because it's very difficult. If you don't know it, recruiting experts is getting harder and harder. And those DNA experts are experts. So they're getting harder and harder to recruit. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It gets close. And what level of capacity are we using in the DNA lab today?
I would say it's probably about, I'm just guessing, we're probably less than 50%
Correct.
capacity.
Correct. So, to answer your question about why is our DNA lab better how do we compete with other laboratories? We have equipment such as the MVAC, such as we are looking into genetic testing that other labs around the world are not doing. They're very limited labs that do this. And so this is a service that we can offer to help provide DNA to our citizens and maybe possibly to other citizens outside of our parish to bring closure and answers to what's going on in their families. And
That's
Very
right. She's talking about the MVAC machine, and it's basically, you can collect DNA in different ways. Swab is kind of the most common way, but there's a little machine, it's called an MVAC, and just like it sounds, a vacuum, it kind of pulls up material like a Zamboni or something, and then you can analyze that material. But not many people are doing that, so that's an instance that we can find those niches that other people aren't serving. So it's not just that we're world class, we can fill in these niches. We have that capacity. Getting into the genetic genealogy a little bit, we just solved 2 cold cases. We identified those bodies after a long time. And I can't emphasize enough that those cases were worked hard, diligently for decades. 36 years, Pamela Hupp case was worked. Basically in 2 years, less than 2 years, genetic genealogy solved it. And so that's something that our lab could potentially get into, maybe not the whole part of it, but maybe a piece of it. So all these tests, they require a specific, you know, the DNA needs to be analyzed and they compare it to other things. So we could maybe do that part. We have got investigators, so we could also do the genealogy of that as well. And there are 146 unidentified bodies in Louisiana right now. All those people had mothers and fathers. They're just not connected now. If they were connected now, they would be discovered probably. If they had any money, somebody would have found them. So that's something that's very dear to me. I think we should solve all these as much as possible. The 146 in this state alone, but 11,000 in the country that are unsolved. And it's just a matter of time. If we get that information, we're going to solve these cases. With the unknown samples and the unidentified bodies, the genetic genealogy is going to solve a lot. And that's something that our office could step into. And I'm not promising anything, but that's just one example of what we could do.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
fill
both.
capacity.
I'm familiar with both those cases. I happened to read about them recently. The last question I have is relative to this DNA testing. When does your original grant funding? When have you gone beyond that point that you can then start offering services to others and using that equipment? I think in previous discussions we've had with you, there's some limitations because it's still under grant funding until you can make that transition.
I think that's correct. I think every piece of equipment is individual.
Okay.
And you're right. We could still use that piece of equipment, but you might have to pay the grant back, or you have to do different things with that. And again, it may be worthwhile to do that at some point.
Right.
But Laura could maybe speak more about the grants and how they expire.
So yes, we have grants that, we continuously get grants. So while some of them have closed and that equipment was purchased in previous years, we do continue to apply for grants, which will be ongoing. So it's just a matter of, right now, I think all of the equipment that was purchased on grants, all of those grants have been closed.
Okay.
It would be any equipment that we purchase in the future on new grants that we would have to go through those steps.
So you could now start using some of that equipment to go generate additional revenue over time as you built that up. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's all I have, Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Styler. So, all the equipment, the DNA testing, genealogy stuff, we do all that in-house at the coroner's office?
No, we don't do any genealogy.
Okay.
I'm saying we could do it. Right
We
now,
have
we're just doing
the-
DNA analysis. So you get a piece of DNA, and they analyze it in different ways. They're not just strictly going the whole genome. They're looking at specific sequences that are uniquely inherited.
Okay.
They're snippets, they're called, the SNPs. So looking at all these SNPs, that's what our DNA lab does now, is basically analyze this. They get a profile together with all these unique individual characteristics of this unknown individual, and then they compare it to what's known already, like in CODIS. But very often, it's something from '86, there's nothing in CODIS. You know, people weren't collecting DNA back in '86.
I got you. And Dr. Tate, do you actually do autopsies yourself?
Yes, sir.
The last question I have, CECs, could you explain that a little bit better and how it serves and helps this parish? Because I know it's a really big deal. I know a good bit about it, but I'd just like to hear some more details on the process and et
So
cetera.
again, the CEC is sort of a check on the hospital, the patient, and the doctor doing the commitment. And we're not trying to second guess anybody, but we're just basically seeing if anything is done improperly. So you can decide that your neighbor's dangerous. He's running around, he's doing these things that are dangerous, and you can, in good faith, call up and say, I want an OPC on my neighbor. I think he's dangerous to himself or others. They'll go ahead, and our office actually grants the OPC. The sheriff goes and then takes that individual to the hospital. In the hospital, the psychiatrist there will do the PEC. And then within 72 hours, the coroner's office has to do a CEC. Now, one of the things I'm most proud of is that we have a separation between our psychiatrist and the in-staff doctor treating that patient. Because what was happening before is that the in-house physician would do PEC and then put on his coroner hat and also do the CEC, and then also be the attending doctor. So it's kind of, you might have a conflict of interest there, because you might make more money if you keep somebody in the hospital longer. Or you may want to get them out of the hospital because you're too busy. So as the CEC, we don't have any of those kind of conflicts of interest. We just want what's best for that patient.
Right.
Because again, sometimes patients are trying to get out of things, sometimes they're lying, and sometimes people are lying about them. The vast majority of the time, it's a legitimate, this person needs help. And whether it's 24 hours, 72 hours, or 72 weeks, it's not up for me to decide.
Right.
But
And
just that somebody there has to be some sort of process, a little bit of checks and balances. So that's where the CECs come in.
And when you say dangerous, it doesn't mean just dangerous to other people, it means dangerous to themselves as well.
Absolutely. That's our number one, well, not our number one concern, but probably the number one reason for commitments, besides drug addictions.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Tape, if I could build off of what Joe said, I think a lot of people don't understand. I had the benefit of actually working in EMS and then working in the ERs. So you're denying people their liberty. So like if I call and say that my neighbor is acting bizarrely, the sheriff, after the coroner's office issues the OPC, correct?
Yes, sir.
Then that's a legal document that takes them to the hospital against their will, where they might just get evaluated by an ER physician, at first, and then hopefully they'll see a psychiatrist. But then y'all do the next check to make sure everything looks good, because before we had situations where people were self-dealing, or at least it looked like that might go through.
That's my concern.
Right.
I'm not saying it happened or not.
Right.
That's my concern.
And Councilman Impastato and I we had the opportunity to meet with your psychiatric director, and he explained his system and how all that works. I also want to thank you, because you did mention when your current runout is, and y'all helped us with the millage earlier this year, so I do appreciate it, and that kind of accelerated your runout plan. And I can imagine, since your source of funding has now been cut, it's not going to automatically renew. Y'all are doing your best to stretch out your money as far as it possibly can go.
Yes, sir. We're sort of planning for the worst, but hoping for the best.
Understood. Okay, and then Councilman Kugel, you'll be next. My next question is, for the newer council members, could you explain how the parish, how we administer y'all's budget, how that kind of goes on?
If I understood, I would explain it.
Or perhaps one of your staff could.
Yancey, Doyle.
I might be able to help answer some of those questions.
I mean, really, and I'm joking but it's not really a joke, because we don't understand it.
Gotcha.
Well, go back to the coroner's emergency certificates first, if you don't mind. There's fees for that. Everyone who is issued a CEC or coroner's emergency certificate, the parish domicile is responsible for paying for those coroner emergency certificates. So even if someone has been committed in another parish, the parish gets billed. But the parish coroner's office, as long as we had the millage, we've been paying those fees. And you're looking at, if now that the millage is ending, it's going to be the responsibility of the parish government. So that's going to be probably another $350,000 that's going to have to taken out of your budget. The way I looked at the new statute, and I know it's under litigation. We have our attorney. He can stop me if I say something I'm getting
That's
off.
understandable. We know we have the
Okay.
the bumpers up, so to speak.
He'll hit me in the back of my head, I'm sure. Well, we want to present to you the most accurate budget. There's some things in there we carried over from last year, but we having trouble understanding, because there's a cooperative endeavor agreement in the past that allowed the parish administration to take 2% for an administrative fee. So in the new statute that's passed, there's several fees that they claim they can take. The administrative fee, an oversight fee, this fee, that fee, if you read the statute. But there's no set amount on how much the parish administration is allowed to take. So if we want to assume, because they took 2% for the administrative costs, they're going to take 2% for all these other costs, it's going to be over $1 million, like $1.1 to $1.2 million. So, and that's supposed to be taken right off the top. The past statute said that the sheriff collects the tax and puts it in a special fund for the parish government and is transferred to the coroner's office. But it reads now is collected by the sheriff and transferred to the parish government. So it won't even come to the coroner's office. The only thing we have control of right now is what is in our possession that the statute said we are supposed to turn over to the parish government. So it's confusing, and I just wanted to, think that we don't know how those administrative fees is not spelled out on how much it's going to be. We have no cooperative endeavor in the future for that, which we're supposed to be putting together a new cooperative endeavor according to that statute. But that's a concern that I have. And so when the money's collected at the end of this year, it said the parish government's no longer, obligated to abide by Title 13-5706, which is fees for the coroner, until the end of the ad valorem tax. So when the tax runs out, it doesn't say that we're supposed to be using our funds, the money that's in savings. It just said the parish government is now responsible to pay the bills. But, the money's going to be used to run the coroner's office. But when the money is transferred from the sheriff to the parish administration at the end of this year, there's nothing to say how the bills are going to be paid. Because what are we supposed to do? Bring all our invoices to the parish and say the coroner has certified this is a necessary and unavoidable expense to be paid, and the parish administration is going to start writing the checks? The money's going to be transferred into an account for us for the whole year? Somebody else can maybe help me answer that question?
So yeah, basically the sheriff collects them, gives them the government, and it gets dispersed, as far as my understanding of it. And the details of that, the lawyers are working out.
Gotcha.
We have somebody
Leslie,
that can answer
the
that.
administration's going to comment. Leslie?
I was just gonna point out that I think in your packet on page 229 of the budget book, the third to last line is the interfund charge. So we use statistics through the cost allocation plan as well, and the charge for 2025 is $22,432 for the administration.
So that's basically what we charge for, that we charge the coroner's office?
And that's right now because, of course, like he just said, they're paying all their own bills, and that has always been the case. The parish did not pay the individual bills. It was addressed, like he said, through the CEA by a transfer of the millage collected based on the budget that's approved by the council.
Okay.
So does that mean the money's going to be transferred to us for the year, in an account, for us to write our checks?
The budget that we have, well, as you've already alluded to, there's a couple things that we have not resolved, correct? The budget that is before the council was under the assumption, using the act that was passed, that all excess funds, which you in your answers described as being $15 million of a fund balance at the end of the year, was going to be transferred to parish government for deposit in the coroner special revenue fund. And if those funds were being returned, then yes, we would be transferring funds to them for operation based on the 2025 budget that the council approves.
Okay, I see that the administrative fee maybe is what you're referring to as the interfund. But what about your oversight charges and all those other charges? How much are those going to be, and where are they at in this?
It's all part of the same charge.
So all of it totals together is going to be $22,000?
For 2025, under the assumption that we're going to be receiving the taxes, depositing them in a special revenue fund, and then based on a CEA between the coroner's office and the parish government, we transferring taxes to you for operation of your office.
Leslie, could you maybe highlight, pick another agency, the DA, for example. You explained to us several times before, you provide them January and February, and you do, I don't know the details, but if you can give them an example, we might be able to clear this up and be able to move on to questions. At a very top level.
So the previous CEA that we had with the coroner's office called for the council to adopt a budget for an amount that we pass through of the tax for their operation based on their detailed budget. And the CEA was set up that on January 1st and July 1st, we transferred 50% of the adopted budget. So on like the first week in January, we would transfer 50% of the budget, and then on July 1st, and then any capital expenditures, we only reimbursed, it was on a cost reimbursement basis, because sometimes they were budgeting for capital items, but then not purchasing them. So they just sent us a request for reimbursement, and we did that.
That's perfect. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, there was one more. Annie was reminding me that the CEA and the legislation was at the end of each year when they went through their audit process, and you know, they looked at their revenue versus the expenses for the year, and there was excess funds. Those were returned to the parish and deposited back in the coroner special revenue fund.
Okay. And Pat Phillips?
Sir, if X was 100% of what capabilities of the facility could perform, where do you think you're at? Like 50%, 75%?
I think 50% is a good off the head number.
So
Because like I said, we have 2 morgues. We could double that.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA space is, you know, roughly half used, could be used more. There's not much physical room for expansion. I mean, we got plenty of land, but.
So do you think you need to hire another, do we have a need that you have to get another doctor to utilize that other room? Do you have that much work going on?
Yes, that's one of the things we're looking at. And the one of the things we have budgeted is for another forensic pathologist.
And then getting back to the millage, when it runs out, the last time you collect funds from the millage would be when?
This December 31st, I think, or
Correct.
basically that's when it gets, that's the last dollars collected. It'll be dispersed over the next spring, I think.
So this year?
End of this year.
So wouldn't you think they should already be looking to when they're gonna get on the ballot to renew the?
They tried though, and the previous coroner tried and failed.
Okay, so, okay.
Councilwoman
Yeah,
Campbell?
hey,
Oh, sorry. Mr. Cool, I think you've gone already, so just
Okay.
Robert's rules, let Cheryl go and then you go next.
If I could help answer Pat's question, I think that's something that the administration and council and the coroner needs to look at for, if we're gonna put something on the ballot this year. I think we have to put it on for a May election if it's to still be, a renewal. If it's after that, then it becomes a new tax.
Right, that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Cool.
There's sort of pluses and minuses. We've been thinking about this. It's not the first time we're thinking about this.
Yeah.
Trust me. I mean, I've been thinking about this since I became in as a contract doctor, before the millage failed. I was hired as a contract doctor last spring. I was full-time May 1st after the millage failed. We've been thinking about it for a long time. The sort of pluses and minuses, renewal versus new. This is not a good political environment to ask people for new taxes. You know that. So we're still trying to figure out the best way to do that. It's not a good political situation. I mean, I'm just going to say it. You guys voted 13 against me, and now you want a millage. So we need to all work together and cooperate. And hopefully you see that. You know, we're trying to do what's best for the community.
I'm gonna try, and we need to do something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Pretty quick, and it's not, we wouldn't support it or anything, it's like, this needs to get on the ballot pretty quick, you know, so.
Well, I agree. My point is that there's still political fallout from what my predecessor did against me.
I understand.
And you guys fought for it.
No, I'm not casting blame, I'm just saying we need to look.
But honestly, I don't think it matters whether Tape's corner or Preston's corner. That millage is not popular. So let's be realistic about it, first of all.
I get it.
And I think fortunately we have a little bit of leeway. We have a little bit of run out, so maybe we could do it next year versus trying to squeeze it in.
I think the
with this year.
renewal has to be done with by next year, but then obviously the new one can be any time.
Yeah.
And as I said, there's pluses and minuses and advantages and
So,
disadvantages.
Back to that, when does it become, it would be a new tax? If it was on the ballot next fall, which if you started.
It would be a new tax.
It would be a new
I
tax.
think if anything that's not on the ballot in May, if it's not in next year for May, then anything after that will be a new.
Which just means you can't use the word renewable.
Right.
We want to tell it
Gotcha.
that.
Mr. Cook?
Back to, because there was a lot of interest in this, the change with SANE. So just logistically and financially, just so I can understand how this works. So the victim either goes to the police or to the hospital, and then now that, because there's this cooperative agreement, the nurse is already there from Jefferson and the nurse will come, or how does that work? And do we reimburse Jefferson afterwards, or can you explain how that works now with the change of it moving to
The
Jefferson?
survivor contacts either the police or goes to the ER. That nurse examiner can either come, usually they're wherever they live, maybe, would be depending where they live. If they live in St. Tammany, they'll go right to the hospital. If they're already over in Jefferson doing some work, then they'll have to drive over.
Okay.
Just the same way before the nurses were going to Tangipahoa and Livingston. So if you're a survivor of in Livingston, you would have to wait for 2 hours for the nurse to come over there.
And then
And so for the reimbursement, yeah, there are certain grants that don't quite cover everything. And so we're basically, we're working with Jefferson to pay for our fair share. So they bill us basically per case that they're working for our patients.
Is it more, or I guess, is it more or less expensive now that it's been transferred? Or is the
It's
taxpayers
less
the same?
expensive, I believe, because we're working with grants and we don't have the full-time salaries. But if you'll notice, we have the full-time salaries back in the 2025 budget. Again, as part of the worst-case scenario, I'm preparing for the most money, and hopefully we don't have to spend all that money. But if for some reason Jefferson doesn't want to continue that, which I believe they will continue it, but if they don't want to, I have to be prepared to absorb those salaries again.
Okay.
The bottom line is the survivors are not missing out on what they need.
That's what I'm interested in as well.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's costing us anything right now.
But
because
you,
the grants
don't you have
pay.
to, so the grants are reimbursing Jefferson?
At the end of the year, I think if the grants don't cover it, then they will have a reaccounting.
Okay.
The grant expired in October, and then it renewed for another year, just renewed, so
So the grants, state or federal?
it's a state or federal?
It's a federal grant, but we go through the state.
Okay.
There's the grant term, we have the grant term.
Okay.
And y'all correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just remembering from memory when I worked in the ER. So when a survivor of a rape presents at the ER, okay, they're isolated if there's room. And then the beauty of the SANE program is you're taking a specialized nurse who's on call for a region, they report there, and then the hospital nurse, because a rape would take a nurse off the floor for like multiple hours to do the exam. So this way, it helps the hospital, it helps preserve the thing, and I think, Dr. Shape, y'all just deferred management of that program for this year to Jefferson, correct? Whereas the
correct.
previous coroner expanded his scope to include managing that, correct?
Right, and covering all of Region 9. So we were subsidizing the taxpayers of Tangipahoa and Livingston and so on, because they were never paying us. And again, I have to protect the millage of the people of this parish. I love people of Tangipahoa, but they're not my people. They're not who I'm representing.
Right.
So the whole program, the way it's written, it's supposed to be done by the hospital, an accredited hospital. And you kind of touched on a point. The coroner taxpayers were supplementing the hospital, because the hospital didn't have to cover this, they didn't have to supply this. So again, I'm not sure if that's correct or not. It's a great thing for the hospitals. They loved it because less money for them, less people to supervise for them. But I had also issues with it because I'm sending over a nurse examiner. I can't control that hospital. if a doctor over there harasses my nurse, or if that nurse slips over there, I have a lot of issues with that to begin with. But again, the same program supplements the hospitals. I'm just going to say it. It's taxpayers supplementing the hospitals. The hospitals are accredited. They should be running this program themselves. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Two questions.
Chip?
Yeah, I have two questions I'd like to ask. One is what's the number of open budgeted positions that you have right now?
First, salaried people?
Salaried and hourly, just how many open positions do you have? You said you had 32 employees. Is that 32 budgeted employees or 32 actual employees already in place?
We have 46 total, including, well, that's what budget is. That includes like 2 SANE nurses, for instance.
So you got 46 budgeted, but 32 are filled? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to interpret the data you provided.
Does that sound right, Donald?
Yes, that sounds right. Yeah, so the 32 is what we have now. The budget is budgeted for 46 because it includes.
Okay, what are those other 14 people? Can you give us a kind of a general overview of what those 14 new hires are going to fill? What kind of
we have
positions?
Receptionist, bookkeeper, 2 death investigators, 2 SANE program, and 2 doctors.
Okay. All right. Are there any other key assumptions or premises?
Analysts, I missed analysts as well.
Okay.
Yeah, DNA analysts.
Thank you. Are there any other key assumptions or premises we should be aware of that are embedded in your budget? Because, for example, that's one that wasn't, that we would not have known without asking about. The desire to hire another forensic pathologist is also something that assumptions you embedded in your budget. Or is there any other major items like that that are worth note to us?
The salaries things are the biggest problem. Yeah, the doctor, the forensic pathologist would be the biggest expense,
Okay.
and followed by the DNA analyst. As they're educating me this morning, something like 90% of our budget is salary and retirement and payroll, so it's a big chunk.
Do you have a cost of living increase embedded in your budget?
We do.
And what would that be?
We have 3.5, I think.
No, I think it's 2.4.
Well, no, it's 3.5 that's built in, and the discussions have dropped that to 2.5 since we've seen some updated numbers on the cost of living adjustments that are going out, like Social Security just announced what theirs were. So we think that's a number we can back off of some.
Okay. And for your lowest level employees, it might be prudent for you to take a look at the library's recent salary study, as well as the parish has a recent salary study. I recognize the positions don't always match up. They're not going to match up exactly. You're a completely different function, but it might provide you some additional guidance regarding minimum salaries, especially for some of your lower paid hourly employees, and also maybe even some of the executives and how they fit fit locally.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. We'll look at that.
Okay. That's all I have, Arthur.
All right, looking to my left, to my right. I think that concludes it.
I mean, to your point, we're bringing HR into this, and it's something I'm learning about, all this comparables and all that. As you say, it's a little bit different because we're dealing with stuff that's really prone to making us burn out. So recruitment and retention is really big for me. So, and it's not just about throwing money at people. You have to really make them want to be there and be doing an important job. And we do an important job, so that's easy. But I have to make them really want to be there. So yeah,
Okay.
we have some challenges. I mean, to kind of get back to your point about that, we have been sort of generous because we had the millage. I mean, our office the last 15 years. I don't know if that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but we were generous with the hospitals, with the CECs, and with the DNA, with the law enforcement. And so now what we're going to do is we need to start asking for some of that back because we're in that position. We've lost the millage. We don't know if we'll get another one. So I'm not trying to be difficult, but where I'm clawing back, it's because I'm trying to protect the millage that's already been established. So if I seem discooperative or uncooperative, I'm not. I'm just trying to protect the interest of the millage that's already been passed.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank y'all. Have a great day. We appreciate you coming out to Towersville.
Thank you.